what we got was so much valuable insight. And, 2 hours of our time just meant, I can remember Glenn and I just looking at each other after one of the sessions going, oh my gosh, we have so much to dissect here. We have so much to think about. How do we bring these fantastic insights into our business? Because to be really frank, like, I'm in my early 30s, so is Glenn. We thought that we knew our demographic because we are in it. But so much of what came out of those sessions was like gold. We were like, of course that's how we should do it. Of course that's how we should approach it. But we just hadn't been thinking like potential members.
Welcome to episode 62 of the Innovating Advice Show. I'm joined by Jessica Brady, co-founder of Fox Hare in Australia. Whether you're planning to start your own business or looking at ways to innovate an existing business, this episode is chock full of great advice. Jess walks us through the 2 years of planning that she and her business partner, Glen, did before launching Fox Hare. She discusses the focus groups they conducted and continue to host annually, and why all advice businesses should do the same. She also shares how they gain media exposure, the many things you can do pre-launch, even if you've got non-competes, and why, if you've done your research, you should launch that business even if everyone is telling you you're crazy. Fox Hare launched 3 short years ago and is on track to have a team of 13 by the end of 2020. And what's most fascinating about that is that neither Jess nor Glen had prior experience as advisors, proving that innovative thinking and solid planning are far more important than technical expertise. Links, show notes, and full transcript at innovatingadvice.com or directly through the link below. You're listening to the Innovating Advice Show, and I'm your host, Kate Holmes, bringing you the global pulse on financial services innovation, featuring financial planners, financial advisors, and related professionals from all corners of the globe. Let's dive in. Hi, Jess. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's great. I'm trying to soak up some of the coolness that you have because it's so hot and warm here. So you're super far away in Australia, but I always love how easy it is to connect with people all over the world and learn about the great things they're doing in business and their amazing stories and how they got there.
Well, I'm so excited to tell you a little bit more about our journey. And I have to say from the outset, Australia's winter pales in comparison to winters elsewhere in the world. So my version of cold is not necessarily everyone else's version of cold.
Right. But I love that. I love that nice, not super intense cold like we get in the Midwest US here. That's too much for me.
Right. Exactly.
So you and Glen started Fox Hare. So let's start with where that name came from.
Sure. I'd love to tell you that I was creative enough to come up with it, but alas, I wasn't. Glenn and I spent so long thinking about what do we want to name this business? And for us, we wanted to do something that was different and unique and memorable. And we've had people tell us it sounds like a pub and it sounds like a creative agency. And that is exciting to us because it doesn't sound like a financial advice business.
Yeah.
But my business partner's name is Glen Hare, like the animal, and I have red hair like a fox. And so my girlfriend said, why don't you name it Fox Hare? And I thought, that's it. After doing all these workshops and really trying to find a name, that just stuck with me. And I guess it's a bit of a play on the financial advice businesses that put the two partners' surnames together as well. But now it's become its own thing, and it's taken on a life of its own. It's no longer just about Glenn and I, which is fantastic and is resonating with the younger market.
And it's just super fun. I mean, the first time I heard it, I felt this like warmth and, fun personality that was behind it. It didn't come off as, hey, I'm, like you said, like the super serious financial advice business. I could be anything. And so it's very welcoming.
Thank you. That is exactly what we were hoping for.
Good. So how did you and Glen meet, and how did Fox Hare come about?
Sure. So Glenn and I both worked at Macquarie Bank, which is a pretty well-known investment bank in Australia. And actually our clients were financial advisors. So Glenn and I spent a lot of time on the road together, seeing our financial advisor clients. And we got talking about, what are you doing in your career progression and what do you want to do? And what we both realized was that the level of management, which was the logical next step in corporate didn't really appeal to either of us. And so we got talking about, well, what would we love to do? And what was very obvious from our road trips to see other financial advisors in Australia is financial advice is largely targeted towards pre and post retiree clients.
Yes.
And we were in our mid-20s and we were like, what about us? We earn good money. We're really ambitious. We have all these grand plans, but we don't know how to get there. And so we went on quite the journey to start Fox and Hare, but we did a lot of work pre-launch. So we did about 2 years of work incognito while still working at our corporate role. Yeah. So that when we launched, it was a pretty well structured and organized, our business. Our website was done. We had 10 members ready to work with us already. So quite a non-traditional start to a financial advice business from what I understand from others who've gone out and done it as well.
But that's great. So what were some of those key things that you knew you had to have in place? I mean, taking 2 years, that's doing it nice and thoughtfully while you're still in your main businesses. So do you have a roadmap of, hey, we have to have these 10 things ready to go before we can take the leap?
Yes, definitely. So Glen is an incredibly structured and organized human, which I'm ever eternally grateful for because I am not. And we ran a project management system. We had very clear projects, actually, different projects around, well, what's our value proposition and what's going to be our fee structure and who will we be licensed through and who are we targeting? What's our marketing plan? We basically looked at every facet of the business and tried as best we could to plan ahead of time. Now, of course, there's one thing around, preparing it in isolation to it being real. And then when you launch, you realize, oh, okay, this is how the real world works. Things are very different to how we expected. But a lot of the work that we did up front has completely helped us and enabled us to grow at a very rapid rate since launch.
Yeah, definitely. And you said you both worked with advisors. So how much experience did you have as advisors?
Well, starting a new advice business when you've never run a business before, you would assume you would have at least been an advisor before, but no, Glen and I had neither ran a business nor been advisors. So to say it was a learning curve is most definitely an understatement.
But how much of that do you think actually benefited you from coming from a completely fresh place where you didn't have anything that you had to unlearn and you could just look at everything with fresh eyes? Do you think that was an asset in going out on your own?
Oh, 100%. And I think if I'd have known the effort and energy required to get Fox and Hare to where it is now, I'm also not sure that we would have done it. No, in all seriousness, it was a huge learning curve, but you're right. To be able to look at things and really stress test, why are we doing things like that? Why does it need to be done like that? Is there a better way? Is very invaluable. And obviously we had advisors as mentors in our very early days. And we had all of our strategies checked and cross-checked from a compliance perspective. So we were really able to pick up our knowledge gap quite quickly. But yeah, we come at things from a very different angle. And I think that that's because A, we're from a corporate background, and B, because we don't have the shackles of these ingrained beliefs and ways to do things that perhaps some other people have who've been giving advice for a long time.
And do you think as you were going about setting up your business, because you weren't advisors, was that possibly easier to do on the side? Because I know a lot of times advisors, they've got non-competes and they've got, a lot of ties to organizations. And so they find themselves in a position where they almost have to leave before they can begin the process of starting a business.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. So it was a strange situation for us because obviously we couldn't run it as a side hustle and have it as just a small business and then hope that it would grow enough so that we could reduce our corporate role. We were under a contractual agreement where we were either working for the corporate or we weren't. And so that became quite big and scary to take a leap of faith to really the unknown. But we didn't have all those traditional non-competes about clients or members moving across. But what we tried to focus on was, well, what are all of the other things that we can do that are within our control right now to make sure that when we do launch, we have created enough momentum and created enough of a strategy so that we're not having to scramble and work with anyone to bring in revenue, because we wanted to be really clear on who we help best and we wanted to stay really true to that.
That's super important. So what would you say are those top things? You listed a few, but I just want to make sure we repeat them because I know there are people out there thinking, hey, I think I want to do this, but it feels super far down the line. And so I don't know where to start now. But I think having some of that momentum and saying, hey, these are the 5 things I can do now to just get the ball rolling. And that was so great how you just put it of we wanted to be ready and confident knowing that we would be only working with our ideal clients and not taking on anyone. And that is, as you know, one of the biggest challenges in starting your own business is, hey, you have to say yes to everything because you need income coming in.
Yes. And I find it beautifully ironic that in a lot of situations, financial advisors haven't financially planned for starting their own business, and the revenue that the capital that they need to start the business, and also what they need to live off. And so that was also part of the lead time, so that when we launched, we knew we didn't have to take an income for at least 12 months so that we had the space to be able to build what we wanted to build. And yeah, I think it's important. I think it's important that we practice what we preach in that respect as well. But some of the things that we did focus on, so licensing, we spent a lot of time doing due diligence on who was the right licensing structure for us in Australia. It was very interesting timing because we were in the middle of a royal commission and into financial advice. And there was a huge sort of anti-establishment wave coming through for younger people. And so we held a focus group. And one of the main topics we talked about was, what do you want to see from an ownership perspective of our business? And what came through really loud and clear from these people was, we want you to be unaligned to any larger organization. So that was a really interesting finding that I don't think we would have given as much focus and attention to had we not heard from our ideal clients what they wanted in terms of that, because there was a perceived conflict of interest.
So putting it simply, it sounds like it's kind of really going a truly independent route as much as possible.
Yeah, in Australia, we have some really interesting terms. We must be called unaligned as opposed to independent because we take commission on insurance. And so you're right, we as a license have no ownership by any of the big players. In fact, there's just 3 of us who we run a sort of co-op style, and that gives us full autonomy. And it means that members know that there isn't a tie to a larger institution. And for them specifically, that was a concern that they had and a barrier that they had around getting financial advice from us. So I think that that was a really interesting piece of research that we did before launch, and it did very much affect how we decided on our licensing options. We did all of the marketing and PR strategies pre-launch. We came up with the coaching programs that we have and the pricing models for those coaching programs pre-launch, and the member journey. So we really mapped out, when someone reaches out to us, what is the experience that they're going to get, all the way from initial reach out to strategy and recommendation being delivered to them, and what technology will we use to support that. So they were sort of the key pillars that we focused on initially. And of course, they've ever evolved and changed and been added to. But that really meant that when we did launch, we had a really great understanding of our ideal member because we had focus groups to ask them. We had a brand strategy, we had a website, we had a logo, we had programs to show people, and we had a really rough idea of how the member would engage with us along the way.
And then it sounds like that also means that you then had those expense outlays while you still had an income, so that it wasn't this sudden outflow of cash when you started the business, starting everything from scratch.
You are correct. And one of our mentors, I will never forget this, had breakfast with us, and we said to him, we think we're just going to get a off-the-shelf website to save on cost, and it will cost us next to nothing. And he said, you're really targeting high quality professional young people. They are going to look at that and know straight away that that's, exactly what it is, an off-the-shelf website. I think you need a custom designed one for the target market that you are working with. And he was very right. And that was a huge investment that we paid for while we were still in corporate. And it was a big investment, but it is still almost 3 years later paying really big dividends for us.
That's great. So how much time would you say you spent in an average, week or month during those 2 years on getting all of this stuff ready?
Yes. So we had at least one evening a week where we would come together because we used to be able to do that and have face-to-faces. But then throughout the week, because we were running a project management system, we obviously were interacting through that. And then I think it was about every second weekend for almost a whole day. So there was a huge investment of time.
Yeah. Wow. But it paid off.
Yes, it did.
So big question, what due diligence did you do? I know you worked together and you traveled together, but going into actual partnership is a big deal. So what were those conversations to decide if you were right for each other in that?
I'd love to tell you that we sort of had all of these very clear questions that we interviewed each other on, but that would be a lie. We didn't do that. However, when we had our weekly sessions, it just became so apparent that there was so much value alignment. We are exceptionally aligned in what we were trying to build and deliver. And I think that that is, in any partnership, such an important piece. And we also have extremely different skill sets. So whilst we both want a common goal or a common outcome, we come at things from really different angles. And that also became really obvious as we were going through almost like that 2-year professional dating process, where we had the time to learn about, well, what do you want to see here? And what's your idea and what's your vision? And so we had the luxury of time to make sure that there was really good alignment. And that has worked extremely well for us, because it is a really big risk when you go into business with someone.
Yeah. So did you have any kind of a business agreement in place prior to launching?
Yes. So again, back to practicing what we preach. Obviously, we had a terms of engagement agreement. We had a shareholders agreement. We were very clear on, that this was something that we needed to set up properly from day one. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't an egg that we would have to try to unscramble later. So yeah, we put all of those provisions in place.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so you spent these 2 years super thoughtful, got all of your PR, your client journey, got all of your licensing in place, everything's ready to go. You hit the ground running day one. And then what does it look like?
Oh my gosh, it was wild. So I used to do a lot of speaking at financial advisor conferences, actually globally, which was an amazing role.
Fantastic.
And so I landed from a conference that I'd been speaking at in New Zealand on Friday night. Saturday morning, I got up and we did a photo shoot for all of the photos for our website and all our videos for the website. Monday morning at 9:30, I saw my first client meeting.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I say it was like a really intense period, it was a really intense period. But yeah, we had, because what was interesting was these people who came to our focus groups, because we held a number of them over that period, the intention really was not to have them come on as members. We didn't want to sell to them. That wasn't really what it was about. But what ended up happening was people were really interested in what we were doing and learning more and understanding, oh, I think I could benefit from advice that looks like this. And of course, because they gave us their insights and input, which we took on board, we were the first people that they called when they were ready to get advice. And so because we had 10 members ready to go when we opened the doors, what we explained to them was, you need to understand that you are helping us build the Fox and Hare journey. And so our first 10 members really helped understand for us where were our gaps and what did we need to improve on. So I would say the first 3 months we brought on those 10 members. And in that time, we got an inordinate amount of PR, and then it just sort of exploded from there.
So how did you put together those focus groups? Where did those people come from?
Great question. So firstly, we had them externally facilitated. I think that that's extremely important. Yes, because otherwise you just sell them your dream because you're so passionate about what you want to do. And we wanted to make sure that actually we weren't spending any time doing that. We were just sitting at the back and we were writing lots of notes and we were listening very intently. So we had it facilitated by someone who worked in market research. And he was fantastic at facilitation, and he is one of our members. He was one of our first members. And then we actually asked our friends and connections to introduce us to their friends and connections who were in our ideal age demographic, but were not close contacts of Glen and I. Because when they're your friends, they think everything that you're doing is great and they want to tell you how good you are and pump up your tires. But we wanted honest feedback about where things were wrong. And we wanted people to tell us, give us really sage advice on where we think we can do differently. And so practically they were held in a pub. in Australia, this is where very important meetings are held.
Fantastic.
It was at nighttime, and all we did in terms of cost, it cost us almost nothing. We just hired a private room in the pub. We put on some wine and some cheese, and we paid the facilitator. We gave them all a small gift, and people were really open to spending an hour, 2 hours with us. In fact, some of them we couldn't get them to stop. We had to wind them up. And we've continued that. So since launching, we do annual focus groups for our existing members about what do you want to see differently from the Fox and Hare experience. And we also do non-member focus groups to see how we can continue to appeal to people who aren't yet on the Fox and Hare advice journey.
I love all of that. So you found the people, friends of friends, and you said, hey, invite them. And there was no pressure. You were like, this isn't a sales pitch. It truly is just a focus group. And then you found this person to facilitate. But you said it wasn't expensive. So that's surprising, I would think.
Well, depending on how much wine people drank. But no, it wasn't. I mean, people think that these things need to be big and onerous and complicated. Like, we just rang a pub and said, do you have a small room? What's your minimum spend? We paid for the market researcher. We paid for some small gifts for people who attended. And that is it. But what we got was so much valuable insight. And, 2 hours of our time just meant, I can remember Glen and I just looking at each other after one of the sessions going, oh my gosh, we have so much to dissect here. We have so much to think about. How do we bring these fantastic insights into our business? Because to be really frank, like, I'm in my early 30s, so is Glen. We thought that we knew our demographic because we are in it. But so much of what came out of those sessions was like gold. We were like, of course that's how we should do it. Of course that's how we should approach it. But we just hadn't been thinking like potential members. We did have that finance layer to us. And it's important to recognize that I think we all would based on our experience.
Sure. So you call them members instead of clients or customers?
This is new, and we've been doing this since the beginning of this year, and sometimes I slip up, but I'm really trying to stay consistent with my language. Yes, because what we are trying to build is a community, and then it becomes not just about the financial advice that you receive in the form of a strategy, but everything else that we can deliver to you as part of being a member of Fox and Hare. And this is something that we've got really grand plans for. I would say the membership in itself is very much in its infancy.
Oh, I'm excited to see how that develops. And speaking of development, so what were some of those things that you started in the initial 12 months and looking back now that you wish you knew earlier because you've evolved or changed it over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so Glen and I were talking about this, and we thought, what would we have done differently? It's interesting to reflect on your journey and think about where there were areas that you would definitely go back and change, and a lot of it we wouldn't. Some of the things we thought about was, would we have borrowed money? Because we started with no clients and no experience delivering advice, arguably the hardest route to go down. And it really meant that we bootstrapped everything. And we have worked so exceptionally hard to get us where we are today. But I think about, we were offered capital in the early days and we didn't take it. And I just think about what that could have meant in the early days in terms of being able to bring on staff earlier or make, bigger decisions that were really limited for us because of capital. I think we probably would have borrowed money earlier. We haven't borrowed money at all in the journey, but I think we probably would have if we could do it again. We did not embrace our financial advice technology when we started the business.
Really?
Yes, because it's ugly. And we were using all this non-financial tech because we love tech. And so we got really used to this beautiful industry agnostic tech. And then we got it into our financial advice tech and we were like, ew, this is ugly and it doesn't work properly and things aren't great. And that just led to, honestly, almost just complete breakdown. Glen and I were just getting so stressed because we had to then go back and obviously put our tail between our legs and say to our licensee, okay, we're ready. We're ready now to embrace this technology that you've been telling us to use. And that was a big remediation process of getting all of the data in there as well so that we could do all of the modeling. But I think when you're young and tech savvy, you just expect that financial services tech will do all the things that you want it to do. And here in Australia, that is definitely not how it works. And so we've ended up with a bit of a patchwork or an ecosystem of tech. And in the beginning, we were really keen on just keeping tech to an absolute minimum. But of course, we've realized that that's just not going to work. So that's something that we would definitely have done differently. We would have hired ahead of time. So we hired when we absolutely needed to. Again, because we didn't have any capital, we would have hired with definitely a runway so that they didn't need to come in and start doing things immediately. So that's definitely a good learning, and we're trying to embrace that now.
So how many people are at Fox and Hare now? It started with just the two of you, and then how long till you hired your first person?
So you're right, it started with the two of us, and then I think it took about 9 months to hire our first person. And then it has been a steady stream since then. We now have 10 people in the Fox and Hare family.
Wow.
And we're currently hiring for 3 more. So we will get to 13, hopefully before the end of 2020.
That's incredible. And that's also because you have a wait list, which is a huge testament to all of the work you've done and what you and Glen have built.
Thank you. Yeah, it was scary to come up with this concept of a wait list. And actually, when we turned 2, we took the team to an offsite and we had a high performance coach. And she talked about what are the current business challenges. And we said, we're in this really interesting position because we have lots of people reaching out to us, but we just don't think we can handle the amount of people and do the work at the quality that we want to. And she just flippantly said, why don't you have a wait list? And we were like, oh, because will people wait? And she said, of course people will wait. In fact, exclusivity creates more interest in what you do. And we talked about on that day how we position our wait list, which is really important. And it is saying to them, we only bring on a certain amount of new members per month because we want to make sure that we give you the full attention and experience that you deserve so that we can make sure that the strategies are absolutely right for you. And people are so on board with the wait list. It makes me sort of embarrassed to think that we were scared to have one.
But that's great. And bring on a high performance coach and not ever being in a place where you think, hey, I've got it all figured out. I don't need to keep learning or evolving.
That is definitely not us at all. And we are still so early in our business journey. We turned 3 in October, and I know that we have so much more to learn.
Yes. So you've got the 3 coaching programs.
Yes.
And then what is your fee structure?
Great question. So again, what came out of the focus groups was we have flat fees depending on the membership. So for each of those programs, there is a different initial fee to do obviously all of the meetings, all of the financial education and the strategy and the implementation. And then after that, we do a monthly membership, which is a no lock-in contract payment from cash flow for as long as people need our help. So what we say to people is, you can be a member for as little or as long as you want. And therefore, if you're not getting value from the advice relationship, you do not need to continue to work with us. But because we track goals monthly and our members know whether they are on or off track monthly, because I check in on them and say, hey, I see you're off track. What is going on? There's a huge amount of accountability. And because we really work with younger people and we see ourselves very much as coaches, people are willing to pay that membership to stay on track to achieve their financial goal and to know that they can call us at any time, particularly with the world at the moment, to know that they're going to have access to not only us, but speakers beyond their day-to-day and have actual interaction with them, and that we're going to be checking in on them and making sure that they're okay as well. We were a little bit concerned when coronavirus started to become a very big deal. We thought, okay, was going on a monthly membership with no lock-in contracts the right thing for our business? Are we going to see a huge drop-off? And we didn't at all, which was so fantastic. And what we realized was that for younger people, the downturn in the market actually presented a number of them with investment opportunities for long-term goals.
Fantastic. So how have all of these members and people on the wait list, how do they find you?
It's a very good question, and we track this pretty rigorously. So all of the traditional ways that I think a lot of financial advice businesses grow. So at the beginning, it obviously was about the community that Glen and I built. And I should say, before we launched, we were like networking bosses. Like we went to everything. We built really solid personal brands and relationships with lots of people and lots of community projects as well, which in turn meant that when we did launch, lots of people had a keen interest in what we were doing. And so that sort of created the initial momentum. We do get a lot of PR. That has definitely led to a lot of people reaching out. Our existing members refer lots of people to us. And we do have traditional referral partners as well who work with us. But we do get a lot of people. I'm noticing just recently that Google is working in our favor, which blows my mind because we do not spend 1 cent on SEO or Google advertising. I don't even know where to start with that. It's definitely not my area of expertise, but I think it's because we have younger members and they're so used to reviewing all the services that they use. We have quite a lot of Google reviews, and I think that that's pushing us up. So we're getting a lot of people reaching out from Google searches as well, and all around Australia, not just close to where we are, which is really exciting.
Especially since anybody can work virtually and has to now. So it opens it up far beyond the geographic boundaries, which is fantastic. On the PR, is that just coming organically?
It is now. In the beginning, though, we were quite strategic. So I get questioned a lot about our PR strategy. Right now, we don't have one, other than to say that we have really good relationships with journalists, and they now reach out to us if they would like someone to comment on an article. But in the beginning, we definitely had a PR strategy. And I think advisors believe it's harder to get published than it is. Certainly here in Australia, the journalists have to write stories and they want people's opinions and perspectives. I guess for us, the initial angle was I'm young and female. Glen is a young guy who is part of the LGBTIQ plus community. And so we were very loud and very proud about saying, we want everyone to feel safe getting financial advice. We want people to know that there is no shame, there is no guilt. If you thought that advice was just for old wealthy people, know that this is not true, and we have a safe space for you to come and get advice. So we had an angle, and I think for anything, like journalists just want you to have an angle. So if you've got an angle, I just LinkedIn messaged to them and said, hey, we've just launched a business. This is a bit about us. Are you interested? And almost all of them came back and said yes.
And you have nothing to lose in doing that.
Nothing to lose. And in Australia, we have the Australian Financial Review. It's a very well-regarded publication. And they reached out to us and said, can we do a story on you? And I said, yeah, great, thinking it would be like this tiny little 100 words in the back pages. And it ended up being an entire page spread, which was really surprising. And then when I saw it come out, I said to Glen, isn't this amazing? Even though this isn't our target demographic who read the AFR, the Australian Financial Review, it's such good proof pointing. But actually, I was so wrong. So many young professionals read these publications, and it just showed me that I had no idea. We had 200 people reach out in a day.
Wow.
There were two of us, and we were officeless. So it was just the funniest moment in our business. That really took our business to, it exploded. That was sort of the Oprah effect, where you get much more publicity than you're ready for. And that was wild. That was very wild.
Well, and I want to make sure that we highlight that, because coming at it from that diversity and inclusion and being, loud and proud and, hey, we're doing something different and I want the world to know about it. Look how well it's served you. So what advice would you have to others that are maybe part of a, marginalized community in financial services and have kind of been held in the background, that are thinking, hey, I want to step out into the light, but I'm terrified, and maybe I've told a few people my idea and they say, no, you're not ready for that. You haven't done that. I would not be surprised if you had people say, hey, you are not even an advisor. What do you think you're doing? How do you overcome some of those internal fears?
You acknowledge them and you move forward anyway. So you are absolutely right. People thought we were completely insane. I left a job that I loved to start a business that I had no experience in the midst of a royal commission. And it was a really, really big deal in this. It was over the news every night for almost a year, I think. So people told us, you are utterly mad. And we said yes, but we have done so much research and we have heard from young people that they need a safe space to get financial advice to help them with their goals. And we think that there is a market here. So as long as you've done the research and as long as you understand who you're trying to serve and that you think that there's a commercial element to that, I think go anyway. I don't think that there has been a better time for people in minority groups to stand up and say, we are here and we want to help and support everyone. Because I think particularly for me as a young female, I have watched the industry really stay stagnant, to be perfectly honest. I don't think there has been a huge amount of uptick in the numbers of people who are getting financial advice in Australia, the demographic of people who are getting financial advice in Australia, and the look and feel of those people who are giving financial advice in Australia. So I think it is important and imperative that we stand up and be really loud and say, we need to represent the communities that we live within, and we need to be very clear that financial advice is not just for old, wealthy white men. I have no problem with old, wealthy white men getting financial advice, but they cannot be the only people that receive financial advice in the world. Off my soapbox.
I love that. Jess, that was fantastic. And thank you for saying all of that. And I mean, that even inspired me because that is what we need. That's what we're seeing. That's why I started this podcast. It's, hey, we need to be changing the face, look, and feel of financial advice all over the world. And it takes people like you that are like, hey, I might not have the exact experience, but guess what? I'm going to work my butt off. I'm going to do these focus groups. I'm going to get mentors. I'm going to, talk to as many people as I can. I'm going to take my time, do it right. And good for you and Glen. It has turned out fantastically.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, it's been a wild journey, but I just think about what my career in corporate would have looked like compared to what I'm doing today, and I am just living such a different and amazing life.
I love that. So any advice to people out there that are where either you or Glen were 4 or 5 years ago in the early stages of thinking about this?
I think you need to go into, well, I guess it depends if you're looking at, stepping out of corporate and becoming a financial advisor to an existing business, or whether you are wanting to take the plunge and do it yourself. I think it's about getting really clear on what sort of life do you want. I again think it's ironic that we spend so much time helping other people build their best lives. What does this mean for you? And so Glen and I were we had a 5-year plan before we launched. We had all our financial forecastings done for 5 years, as you would expect a financial advisor. Like, we've been very clear. And we were very clear on what life is this going to give us? Because you do put in, this is not a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday thing. You work really hard, really often in the beginning, but you have to have personal goals. And if there's no alignment between what the new chapter will give you in terms of what you're looking for in your personal goals, you need to solve that conflict first. So yes. For us, we've got very clear business goals that align to our personal goals, which is really important. I definitely think you need to financially plan for any step out of corporate or even just consistent income, because I think so many amazing opportunities exist if you're willing to niche. I really believe niching in financial advice is important. But as I was saying earlier, I watched when I was in my corporate role, I watched a lot of really great people try to run their own business without enough capital. And then they had to dilute their message. They had to dilute their service offering so that they could appeal to everyone. So I would say, have a niche, have a focus, and be able to back yourself financially for a minimum of 12 months to do so. And I would say do as much prep work as you can. And if you are going to go in with a business partner, get really clear on whose role in the business is what and what are the responsibilities. So we basically divvied up, like we were this huge organization, the two of us, who's going to be in charge of IT, who's going to be in charge of compliance, we had from the very beginning a very clear understanding of whose role was whose. And it just meant that we created efficiencies and that we didn't have to worry, did you pick this up or did I miss this? And I think you can take a lot of the great things about corporate and embed them into a small business. I really enjoy doing that. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Jess, I have loved this conversation, and I have to give a shout out to Peta Diamantidis, who introduced us. It's so fun, and it's been such a delight for me, and I know for the listeners, to get to meet all these different people. So I'm thrilled that I got to meet you, hear your story. Huge congratulations on what you have built and all of the amazing things yet to come.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And I have been loving the podcast. I just need to say, you have changed some of the elements of our business. I'm halfway through reading one of the books. Like, my niece has one of the children's books from one of your other listeners. I want you to know that I am listening. I am learning from everyone in your community, and it is actually changing how we're running our business. So a massive thanks to you as well.
Oh, you're going to make me cry. Thank you. That was wonderful. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Innovating Advice Show. If you're wondering where to start, head to innovatingadvice.com/start for a short video series walking you through 3 steps to identify opportunities for innovation in your financial advice or financial planning business. Again, that's innovatingadvice.com/start.